This is a story about a young physiotherapist named Lucas. Just today is his regular working day. Unfortunately, because of the heavy rain, there are very few clients. The industry has a phrase for it. If it's raining outside, there's no patients at all. It doesn't quite rhyme, but it's true. It looks very gloomy outside the window, and the only entertainment in the office is catching flies. Why are they even here in this weather? After a while, Lucas had to make a detour. By the percentages already on the supply, his job is to put heating pads on the patient's sore spots. To ordinary people at first glance it may seem like the easiest job in the world, but that's not really true, because when it comes to muscular, menstrual, and nerve pain, treatment can be provided with just a couple of hands, but you need to be a real expert at what you do. Lucas was previously a renowned therapist in a rehabilitation clinic. There are two things that are considered essential for physical therapists. One is good social skills, and manual dexterity. The kid easily agreed with people for any treatment, and in the future even took out a loan to start his own clinic. The main character also has a girlfriend named Eva. She just texted a message asking him to meet her after work, and the meeting place is a cafe near the clinic. That was really weird of her, because Lucas warned her that he was going out drinking with friends tonight. Something serious must have happened. In the evening, the girl wrote again and said that she had already arrived at the place. After changing his clothes and taking an umbrella with him, the guy immediately went to the coffee shop. He and the girl usually sat in the center of the room, but this time she sat in the corner at the very end. He decided to ask her directly, and he was already happy to meet her without a hint of guilt. Eva, in turn, was sad and taciturn, answering any questions with 1 or 2 words. By the way, they have been together for 10 years. The girl was clearly tense, and even slammed her fist on the table with anger. She had called Lucas here to solve just one question. At that moment, the world inside the guy seemed to turn upside down. He immediately understood what it was about, and even asked in advance, "Do you really want to break up?" Eva said yes and told him that she had another one, who is also a doctor and unlike Lucas has a future in this field. This is how the story of 10 years ended. A few seconds. The fault was the money, which the guy had not so much, but did he deserve it? A knife in the back from his beloved, with whom he planned to live all his life. Her new boyfriend turned out to be really much richer. The girl met a very expensive car, with an extra driver, in which she gladly sat down. In her eyes there was not a drop of regret. Money rules this world. For Lucas this period will be quite difficult. You cannot just take and cross out the person with whom spent so much time. First Lucas went to a bar, to ease his heartache. It started with a bottle of beer, then his friend Jacob came to the bar. Instead of saying hello, he said he knew it would turn out this way. Not exactly a good endorsement, but it's true. Apparently the evening is just beginning. The guys were brought a white-colored drink. They talked about everything at once, about work, relationships, politics. In the end, they came to a unanimous decision. Eva was an ungrateful girl who didn't deserve to be around Lucas. So they sat in the bar until 12 at night. Lucas forgot more or less, but his friend clearly too much to drink. He could not even stand on his feet properly, and could barely string words together. The guy caught the first cab he could find, put him in the seat and sent him home. Despite such a serious vacation, Lucas could not get out of his head, as his favorite person turned out to be a traitor, and quietly left to another. He really began to seem that he was living the most miserable life. Just at that moment in the sky fell a star. The boy decided not to lose the moment, and made a wish to fix his life. Namely, he wished to become the best physiotherapist, to earn a lot, and it would be good to regain his former honor, and become a specialist, obviously better than the one to whom Eva left. As suddenly in the sky begins to fall another star, and it fell right in front of the guy. The whole place starts to go up in bright blue flames. Is this the end? Even his life is worthless. While Lucas was still asleep, his body started the level improvement system. At the moment he felt like his head was going to explode. He'd had too much to drink last night. The alcohol had affected him a little later than his friend. Yesterday it even went to the police. They were holding his hands trying to get an address to take him home. It was so embarrassing. The only good thing is that this whole horror is over. But what happened after the first star flew by? Some kind of explosion, or just a hallucination? In the meantime, the first patient came to the office complaining of severe back pain. He couldn't even move normally. This happened after the man had been carrying heavy things. It had happened a long time ago, and the pain still persisted no matter what he did. As soon as Lucas began to examine the patient, a system window appeared in front of his face. He received his first quest. It is necessary to cure the patient. For this you can get as much as 20 points. Passing the training will give him a special opportunity. The guy, to put it mildly, was shocked by what he saw, and even decided to wipe his eyes. The doctor fell to the floor, started pointing his finger at one system, and asked the patient if he could see it too. The man looked around but didn't see anything. This behavior of the specialist made him very uncomfortable. At this point, Lucas began to think seriously that he was still asleep. The patient was fed up with the whole circus, and he asked to continue examining his back. I had to pull myself together as soon as possible, and start the examination because work comes first, and then figure out what it is. Another system window appeared while working. This time the message was of a warning nature. Lucas' magic eye level was too low to identify and understand the patient's illness. He will be able to get more detailed information about the illness if he increases his magic eye level. In any case, he can't be distracted by it now. This patient seems to have injured his left side lumbar. After work he should have restricted his movements, or else he would have lower back pain. This would have strengthened the muscles on the right side and weakened the left side. If this is as expected, the muscles on the left side should be strengthened. It is time to do some light movements. Their goal is to achieve balance in the patient's body and to avoid putting too much strain on the left side. But no matter how hard Lucas tried to help, it was unsuccessful. The pain was getting worse and worse. Then there was a new notice: if you continue to clumsily handle, then it can lead to his discomfort. From this we can conclude that the treatment is not properly selected. The client asked to try some other treatment method. In this case, Lucas decided to do this obscure level upgrade. Thanks to the primary points, it can be done without doing any tasks. Suddenly it will help after all. The first thing to do is to improve the magic hands and eyes to treat those back pains. From that moment on, the guy was able to treat the patient more accurately, and apply the right amount of strength to carry out the treatment. To move to the next level you need 15 points. The patient almost immediately began to say that he was getting much better, and the pain was almost gone. Lucas did not even know how to react to this, so he just continued to do his job. After the treatment, the doctor asked the client to sit down. It was actually an unusual massage, but a complete treatment. This was followed by a serious consultation. Lucas explained to the patient the real reason for his problem. This process started a long time ago. Due to improper lifestyle, the pelvis deformed to the left side, because of which the spine also started. Physical activity only accelerated this process. Treatment was carried out to correct these problems. In the end, they talked for more than half an hour. Lucas answered absolutely all of the patient's questions. He was extremely grateful for the help and felt much better. He even had a smile on his face, which symbolizes that the client is really happy, will leave good feedback, and will definitely come back in the future. It was really hard. The guy was even a little tired. 3 points were given as a reward for a job well done, and an additional 2 for the training he had received. It's still hard to believe it really works, as the patient seemed happy. Maybe it's worth improving all the other skills too. The first thing he decided to do was to spend the 5 points he had earned on a skill called Magic Brain. As a result of upgrading to level 2, Lucas' brain has become more capable, allowing him to diagnose more accurately and apply the necessary power to perform procedures. Advancing to level 3 will cost 10 points. It's unbelievable, but unfortunately you can't tell anyone about it, because it could get you in trouble. To check how his brain works now, the guy picked up a book his friend gave him and started reading. It took Lucas only 30 minutes of his life to fully master it. His brain really started working much better. Now you can sit down to read books in your specialty. At this rate, you can thoroughly master most important literature in just one day. Unfortunately for today, more patients did not come, but still the day was not wasted. Magic brain, this is just the thing. With the help of it, the guy managed to learn a lot of new information that will help him become a specialist in his field of a completely different level. As the working day is coming to an end, Lucas began to put in place all the books that took to read, as suddenly in the hospital comes an old acquaintance of the protagonist, Joseph, which he just cannot stand the spirit, but nevertheless tries to communicate with him politely. Why he had come here today, couldn't he do it some other time? Since Joseph considered the onion a close friend, he sat down on the couch without even asking permission, took out a bottle of liquor, took a sip, and began to ask how the day had gone, how many patients there had been. The guy sat down on the sofa opposite and said that today was basically business as usual. Nothing supernatural had happened. The alcoholic had also heard that Lucas had broken up with his girlfriend, rumored to be cheating on him with a coworker, or something like that. A long time ago, when Lucas still went to school, he began to look after Eva. A large number of guys wanted to meet her and start dating, but she refused everyone, because at that time she was already in love. The whole class began to laugh with this good man, although he prepared well, bought a gorgeous bouquet, got on his knee, but will be refused. This incident happened just before the end of the school year. There are only 10 days left before the exams, and the boy who confessed his love to the girl in front of the whole class has not attended classes for 7 days. Apparently he fell into a severe depression. These days flew by like a blink of an eye. The exams started in full swing, and one evening, after the exams, Lucas met Eva. Then they had a very nice chat, had fun, and you can say that at that very moment began a love story of 10 years. At one point, when Lucas was going through a real crisis and financial difficulties, Eva started to communicate with the very guy who had proposed to her at school in front of everyone. Only after such a period of time he became a successful young man with money. Of course, such an influential man with a great future caused her not at least some interest, and began a romance, which grew into a full-fledged relationship. When Joseph learned the reason for their separation, he said this: "Although he stayed to work in a miserable, dirty hospital, but he always has money on his card." In general, everyone who knew Lucas assumed that after opening his own clinic, things will go up for him. After all, as a specialist he is good, but for some reason it happened. Joseph's main motto is that if you have a lot of money, then girls are not a problem. He also suggested to Lucas not to waste time and get a job at his hospital, because the loans will not close themselves. The hospital is just looking for new doctors, but the hiring process is quite peculiar because it is the best rehabilitation center in Korea. That was the main reason Joseph had come to visit, but before he said it, he decided to talk about everything at once. After this tedious conversation, the guy just fell asleep on the couch and began to consider all the functions of the system. By the way, about the loans, they need to be repaid in the next few days. Lucas fell asleep on the couch with thoughts that he wanted to win money in the lottery, and at that moment a star fell. Also in the dream he remembered the words of his acquaintances. 2 people had already recommended him to get a job in another hospital. The first thing that was decided was to play the lottery. After all, with such skills, to win there by memorizing numbers, it is more than real, and after that to submit a resume to another hospital to get a job. The next day, Lucas went to the bank to pay off all his debts. As of this moment his credit status was in perfect order. This was insanely good news. The lottery was weaker than a skill called Magic Brain. Then the guy gets a text message on his phone with good news. The ID check stage was successfully passed. On February 21st at 1500 hours they scheduled a job interview at the hospital. To arrive on time, the guy immediately went to the subway and with a smile on his face went to the office. For the sake of such an event, he even declared a day off at his clinic. You can see this hospital from afar. It's huge. It's called the best in the country for a reason. At the entrance, Lucas was greeted by the receptionist, who politely asked what she could do for him. He informed her that he had an interview for a physiotherapist position here today and asked where he could go. To get to the interview room, you have to go up to the 7th floor, where the HR department is located. At first glance, this hospital looks like a 5-star hotel. Going up to the 7th floor, the first thing that catches your eye is the number of people that are here. They only have one vacancy available at the moment, so they have forgotten here. After just 5 minutes, one of the employees who is in charge of hiring newcomers came out into the corridor. She said that the interview was starting, the more experienced doctors would be the first to audition. Lucas was relieved to hear that. It turned out that most of the people here were just newcomers. Only the first group came in, and it had already been so long. How could the interview take so long? Then a very nervous girl came up to the floor, worried that she was late for the interview. Then she saw a vacant seat next to Lucas and asked to sit next to him, to which the guy kindly agreed. To calm her down a little, the boy explained that the interview had already started, but the more experienced doctors had gone first, so there was no need to worry, no one had missed their turn. While this lady wasn't here, Lucas felt fine and didn't worry a bit, but now he was getting nervous too. It was necessary to organize some calmer environment. Every good doctor always has with him some medicines or plaster. Our hero was no exception. Looking closely, he noticed that the girl has a red spot on her foot. It means that the shoes are at least a size smaller and rubbing the skin. In order to energize her with positive emotions, it was decided to give her a band-aid. She was overjoyed, she almost cried, and from that moment on she had a new dream in her life. Namely, that they would both get an interview and be able to work together. The guy stammered and said he hoped so too. Really, he wasn't a rookie. Meanwhile, the woman from the interview room came out into the hallway and said the name Lucas. Now the girl realized that the guy was not an ordinary beginner, but an already formed professional. Even so, Lucas wished her luck and said he wanted to work together. It was time to pass this interview and show herself at her best. There were 3 professionals sitting in the office. All of them were quite serious, and from the first minutes it was clear that no one was going to joke around here. In order not to waste time, the committee went straight to the main thing, namely the first task. The screen shows a treatment scheme for a patient with paralysis resulting from a stroke, and the participants have to explain how they would treat this patient. Only 1 minute is allotted for reflection. Lucas immediately smiled. Isn't it too easy for such a serious interview, especially when people with experience have been invited into the room? The judges listened attentively to all the participants, and that was the end of the interview. The participants thought for a moment that it was really over. The judges paused for a moment and said, "Now let's get down to the real interview." Behind everything were 3 sick people in wheelchairs. Apparently, with the help of them will be conducted all further tests. But this did not frighten our protagonist in any way. Thanks to the improvement system, he will have a significant advantage, unlike his rivals. If in this test all patients have the same cases, it will be easiest to control the patient of small size, with low height and smaller build. The judges gave the contestants the opportunity to choose their own patients, and whoever didn't make it was too late. Lucas, as he wanted to, chose the skinniest man from all those given. The other participants did not choose for a long time, but just went to the closest one. Now it is time to tell the problems of each of the men, as Lucas standing was the first to start. His patient used to be an active billiard player, but now due to immobility he cannot extend his elbow. The goal of treatment is to help him play billiards again without any discomfort. In the center is a girl named Emily. Her patient has worked all his life as a trucker. At the moment he is unable to hold the steering wheel. Because of this he cannot enter. The goal of the treatment is to get him his job back as a trucker. And finally a participant named Joseph. His patient has difficulties with mobility due to a limp. The goal of the treatment is to make it possible for him to walk independently. The guys have only 20 minutes to complete these tasks, and the clock is ticking. Lucas, without wasting a minute, began to set up communication with his patient. The first thing he did was ask him to get to his feet. It was obvious that the man was not quite happy with such a request, but at least he knew what he was signing up for, so he did get up. By the way, his legs were fine. Then the guy asked his patient to pretend that the couch was a billiard table, and to take a playing position. It's quite difficult to do because the patient can't really straighten his elbows. The problem was really immobility. Then Lucas decided to try lifting the man's arms in opposite directions with force, just like lifting dumbbells in a workout. In the end, the guy decided to use contralateral oscillation on the less affected side to improve the condition of the painful area. Muscles cannot move alone because they all affect each other, and this applies to both the right and left arm. The case of this patient may be called the phenomenon that a stimulus applied to the stronger side strengthens the weaker side. Using a technique called cross-training, Lucas asked his patient to straighten his right arm, and suddenly the miracle happened. He was able to do it. The man immediately put his hand up and told the committee that he was cured. To put it mildly, everyone was shocked but just didn't show it. Well, after all, time's up, everyone's done a great job, now stop working with your patients. The man was insanely grateful. His dream had come true. Now he would be able to play his favorite game called billiards again, and in principle fully use his hand. As a reward for the work done, Lucas received 10 points and a special opportunity, an additional 5 as a bonus for learning, total 15 points, a pretty good result. There were too many notifications to read, so the guy closed the system, and the patient couldn't get enough of the way he moved his arm. The judges were watching the guy closely, and one of them even recognized him. We can say the interview went just perfectly. We managed to fulfill all the tasks set. The announcement of successful completion of the interview will be published on Friday, February 23rd at 1500 hours. In the meantime, the committee is in full swing sitting down to decide who is worthy of the position. 2 of them openly tried to favor the girl named Emily. At times it even seems as if it was already agreed in advance who should win the interview. The only valid argument of these guys is that this girl already works in this hospital, and she will immediately have a great relationship with the other doctors. Of course, the fact that she was doing well and already working here was a huge plus, but a doctor named Lucas seemed to Jackson, the head doctor of the hospital, to be a more interesting candidate. In principle, his colleagues agreed with him, but kept insisting on their girl, saying that she was just as good at her job. The point of this interview was not to take someone from the current employees. If there was a decree to choose inside the hospital, no one would have conducted this interview. It makes no sense to rely only on this fact. After these words, the guys fell silent. They just didn't have anything to add, because Lucas was indeed a very strong candidate. The question was asked again: who was the best at this interview? The men already realized that they had been declassified and began to admit that the girl was not good enough to give her first place. Internal promotion of employees, that's great, but you have to prioritize skills anyway, and this guy clearly has them. Jackson has made the wise decision to leave his colleagues alone with this information. Since there are 2 of them and he is alone, he can only hope that they will choose fairly between the 2 candidates and tell him the logical choice. In the end, the colleagues decided to support the head doctor and give the position to Lucas. In the meantime, the guy was already updating the website, because the time was already 1500 hours, which meant that the results of the interview should appear there right now. At first he was in shock, but then he breathed out a sigh of relief because he saw his name on the list. The level up system is a really incredible thing, which helped a lot on the practical task. Now you can finally relax, go into it, and properly spend the coins. There are not many accumulated. Perhaps it would be logical to improve the magic hands to the 3rd level. But interest takes its toll. I want to know what skill magic face and mouth mean. Difficult choices because they can actually be useless if they are upgraded. Let it be better to have a balanced character who can do a little bit of everything, than something one thing, but perfect. Since then, Lucas's facial features have become more expressive. Now it will seem to others that his face has absolutely no flaws. Also, the speech became more clear. The doctor will be able to like the patients more. In general, Lucas has become a real handsome and he likes it. The skill magic face and mouth were not useless at all. Apparently in this system thought up everything to the smallest detail, and it's cool. From the moment the guy received an invitation to work, it's been a whole week. Lucas tried not to waste time, and days and nights studied absolutely everything, starting from books on the specialty and ending with information about the employees of the hospital. Today is the first day of work. It's kind of exciting. It seemed like he was on time, but he was almost late anyway, so it was good that he was lucky this time, but next time he would have to leave even earlier. No matter how many times a guy looks at this hospital during the day, it will always look amazing to him. I wonder how long this period of falling in love will last. As suddenly on the horizon will appear the most nervous girl, Sophia, who on the day of interviews confused a young specialist with an ordinary newcomer. By the way, she is still ashamed of this incident, so she immediately began to apologize. Since Lucas is the most ordinary person, he never takes offense at such trifles. The girl should definitely calm down and go with him together to work. By the way, did she also accept it? When the guys got into the elevator, the girl looked at her idol and saw how handsome he was. The improvements from the system worked just fine. The demand among the girls will definitely increase. On the 7th floor, a large number of people were sitting again. It was probably the 11th group of interns. It was also on this floor that Lucas was now meeting the head of the ward complex for the first time, and coincidentally his first boss. The guys shook hands and got acquainted. Since Lucas didn't waste any time, he had studied all the information about his mentor beforehand. To put it mildly, he was pleasantly surprised by such serious preparation. His name is Jacob, by the way, and he's been hearing about how the guy interviewed just perfectly, and he can't wait to see those skills in action. In the meantime, 2 other guys have come running into the job and have successfully passed the interview. Only unlike the punctual Lucas, they were late and probably didn't ask for any information on the internet. Jacob was probably angry at the lack of punctuality, but for once he decided not to make a scene. It was only 15 minutes, and the hospital kept a clear record of each employee's hours, so it made no sense to apologize in such cases. Since everyone is in place, it is necessary not to waste time and start working. For the guys, they took him to another specialist's office. At the moment he was relaxed, lying in his chair and enjoying his life. The purpose of the visit was to introduce the new employees, Lucas, the new assistant to the head of the department, and the 2 interns they would be working with from today. The guys were insanely happy because they were honored to meet such important people in their field of work. Out of all 3, only Lucas was noticed, because he gave a great treatment to one of the patients on the day of the interview. The guy thanked him for the compliment, of course, but he couldn't understand what was going on with this guy. He was kind of annoyed. Since it was already 9 a.m., he asked everyone to leave the office and start doing their work despite the fact that there was a request to go to work. The team leader said that they should start by saying hello to the other doctors and then only start. While the guys walked through the building, they saw a lot of interesting things, such as this main treatment room. There is absolutely everything for quite comfortable work, such as a device for dynamic assessment of posture disorders, incredibly useful thing. There's also an advanced support bandage that can be adjusted in height and sized individually for each patient. There are even robotic crutches that make life much easier for the patient. Lucas could not have imagined such equipment in the physical therapy center where he had worked before. He clapped his hands and asked for some attention. Now everyone should gather in the 2nd physiotherapy room. That's how the work routine in the hospital started on March 2nd. The mentor apologized in advance and warned that he would be a bit meticulous in the first days of March. The first thing a doctor should get rid of is long fingernails. Recently there was an incident with a patient who got hurt because of the doctor's long fingernails. This is just impressive. In the coming days, you need to take care of your nails and be careful. The doctors have reacted very indignantly to this request, as the patients also have huge nails and they can also maim the doctor with them. The most important thing is that everyone cooperates and tries their best to avoid complaints from the patient and the ward staff. In the first week of work you need to show your skills and how good they are. All agreed at this point the requirements, and were ready to start work. Details regarding the dinner will be discussed next time. Lucas said hello to everyone again, introduced himself as the assistant head of the 3rd ward of the emergency room. In response, the other doctors were silent. They didn't seem very happy to see the newcomers, or they just weren't in the mood. It's time to make sure the newcomers are taken care of and get to work. One of the department heads asked Lucas to come into his office for a little chat. He called him in to discuss his work. The first thing he was given was the list of patients the previous assistant had been responsible for. There was nothing scheduled for today, so Lucas was free to warm up here and work out in detail how he was going to treat the patients. The head of the third department also wanted to discuss one small detail over a cup of tea. The thing is that in the hospital of all close relations with each other, that is literally very close, many people here started as interns and climbed the career ladder for a long time. This is why sometimes the employees may seem strange to the new employees. As Lucas is not from this hospital, he needs to show his good side, then he will definitely be accepted. Now it is clear why the guy was not so happily welcomed. He is one of the few who managed to get to such a high position at once, without being an intern. After this conversation, the guys said goodbye for a while, and the senior went to his patients. It turns out to come to the interview was not the last difficult task in this hospital, still need to establish communication with other doctors. Suddenly the system sends notifications, there is a new quest called Reputation Enhancement. At the moment Lucas's reputation is really at the bottom. Something urgently needs to be done about it, but why the first quest turned out to be so difficult? And the reward is so self-satisfied. At one point the guy doesn't even regret taking the job. But it's too early to draw conclusions. I wonder what the mentor meant when he said to perform well, and if not, what to do in such a situation. When noon came, the supervisor came into the office again, this time with 2 third ward interns. They looked at Lucas with contempt for taking their potential new position. Of course the guy introduced himself, and said he was looking forward to working with them, but he didn't get a word in return, he was simply ignored. This awkward silence had been brewing until the older man suggested that we all have lunch together. After this application, the guys immediately went to the cafeteria. There is a lot of delicious food on offer. For example, today Lucas chose to eat soup as the first course, rice with some side dishes, and pancakes for tea, which is just the perfect proper lunch for people who are health conscious. Suddenly, one of the employees rises abruptly from her desk, looking at Lucas and saying that she was leaving to go about her business because she wasn't very hungry. It's kind of horrible and disrespectful to the new employee, especially the one who is higher up. But why didn't they like the guy so much? In the course of the conversation, the older man decided to remember the girl Emily, who was in the same interview group as the guy. That's why no one wants to talk to Lucas at the hospital, because he prevented that girl from getting a promotion and they hate him. Whatever the guy was thinking about, he had it all written on his face. At least the older man was sure of it. Since there are no such good hospitals anymore, he would have to try very hard to hold on to this place, and absolutely every effort would be made to do so. Suddenly, a new notification came from the system, and the hospital's reputation increased by 1 point. Then Sophia shows up in the cafeteria with her new friends. Apparently the reputation boost is thanks to her, because she tells everyone what a great person Lucas really is. They wanted to sit down and eat together, to which the boys kindly agreed. By the way, these 3 are students of the elder, but since Lucas as a specialist is much higher level, they can forbid to him for advice, and any help. Surely all were already familiar, but the elder, to practice his memory, decided to reintroduce everyone. The students were thrilled to meet him, and said they'd ask Lucas first thing. That's how easily the senior got out of trouble. Emily, by the way, is apparently a close friend of the supervisor, or she's just trying to get him to like her. Because she's bringing him a cup of coffee in his office, a gesture no one just does. The man smiled and said he shouldn't have done that, but she still insisted on having a cup of coffee together. The manager admitted that this time he did not have the right to vote because of the director, because he insisted on his own, and to go against him was like becoming an enemy. But it's not over yet. He promised this girl that he would write on Lucas some medical error, thanks to which he will probably be fired from this position. In this case the main thing is not to overdo it, and write everything correctly, so that there would be no unnecessary questions and it corresponds to reality at least a little bit. It was already 5 p.m., which meant that the working day was over, and when the guy went outside he was surprised that the sun could shine when he left work, because before he had to stay up late into the night, and that's if he was lucky. It was a great decision to close the clinic. Joseph comes running out of the hospital and says it's urgent that we talk. As they say, everything can't be perfect, but thank goodness for that. He was really shocked that Lucas had managed to get a job here, especially one so high up the ladder. Apparently the conversation must be extremely serious. Because Joseph refuses to talk here, he wants to go a little further. Because of such excessive regression, Lucas assumed he knew about the system, but how is that even possible? Eventually he calmed down and said to follow him. When they sat down at the nearest cafe, Joseph asked him directly what kind of magic Lucas used. Of course, the guy smiled, pretended that magic was bullshit, and didn't know what he was talking about. But in fact, he was in shock at the suspicion. Then he starts asking how long Lucas has known the head of the hospital. Maybe it's all just a deal that was planned in advance. This question was the last straw, and the guy also began to answer rudely. In his opinion, Joseph is just angry that Lucas still managed to get the job, and by the way, with the head of the hospital he was not familiar at all. But if that's true, why didn't Emily get chosen in the end? Now Lucas finally realized that the hospital had decided in advance that they were going to promote Emily. But even if that was true, then why did Joseph ask him to get a job here? He must have said that because he thought they wouldn't hire him. Finally the guy calmed down and started talking normally. Now he said he just wanted to talk and congratulate him. Thank God it was all over. Lucas was scared out of his mind when he thought someone had found out about his superpower, and how it had gotten him through the interview. But since that wasn't the case, he could relax. Now their conversations have taken a more friendly turn. Since it's all thanks to Joseph, your Lucas should buy him a drink. Joseph had just said he wanted to congratulate me on my new job, in which case he had suggested that we celebrate another time because he had to go somewhere else. Even though it was all over, the inner jitters just wouldn't go away. The same evening, Lucas met with Jacob at an establishment in the city to have a delicious dinner together. Lucas met Jacob at a restaurant in the city to have a delicious dinner together. To serve such complex topics, you need to get the appropriate beverage, namely 2 beers on tap. In general, there is nothing surprising about all this. The medical industry is like this everywhere, and in this hospital of course also. The sad thing is that Lucas can't even deny it. Lucas remembered that Jacob liked computer games, and he asked him to imagine that the game was real, and asked if it was real. He asked him to imagine that one day the screen of the game system would appear in front of his eyes. He thought that Lucas must have had something wrong with his head because of the sudden change in his life, and even decided to feel sorry for him. In that case, Lucas told him to forget it, and not to feel sorry for him either. Now on his drunken head he started thinking about tomorrow's patient treatment. Jacob assured him not to worry so much, because Lucas had gotten a job at the hospital because of his abilities, which meant he could treat other people without any problems. A friend in this situation was the real support and encouragement that had been missing for so many years. To show his gratitude, the guy promised to close the tab for the evening, so you should order whatever you want. Unfortunately, this decision was a fatal mistake. Jacob was off the chain, ordering large quantities of alcohol and not wanting to leave the place, and Lucas had to get up early tomorrow. In the meantime, the new man Eva passed by an establishment where the guys were already drunk, which pleased him very much, because if a person often drinks, it means that his life is not good. In general, he hopes that everything will continue like this. This man also made himself a document that exempts him from the army. Now his goal is to get a job at the same hospital where Lucas works. It turns out he still doesn't work, and according to Eva's story, you'd think he's already making millions. As has already become clear that his main goal is to ruin the life of Lucas and make it so that he did not succeed in becoming a famous doctor to which people will come from all over the world. But to prevent him will not be so easy, because the cheat system gives him a lot of advantages. The day Eva dumped Lucas he looked very sad. Daniel saw it and enjoyed it. At first glance, it may seem that he did not steal this girl because of his strong love for her, but just to bring negative emotions and disappointments. The next day at work, Lucas sat bored on another shift without work. At this moment, he moved to the main treatment room of the hospital, because at 4 p.m., the first patient in 2 days was due for an examination. He was brought by a relative in a wheelchair. His name is Pak. His problem is that he is paralyzed halfway through his body. He used to be unable to speak at all, but now he has difficulty with some words. The woman was madly glad that she had managed to get to Lucas, because they had wanted to consult him for a long time. Since the guy was an experienced specialist, he immediately noticed that the patient had come here after the exercises. This surprised Puck, because it was really true. In any case, Lucas was very happy that the patient was practicing regularly. Most likely because of this he had learned to speak at least a little bit. You could see the patient was a little scared, but the doctor assured him that everything would be fine. For people like him, nice words are very important, because unfortunately they don't hear them very much. There are a few questions that need to be answered before the examination can begin. The patient's magical chart says that his main goal is to walk again, but he also works as a driver. The doctor needs to know if the patient has a specific reason for wanting to walk again. He has never shared this before, but apparently the time has come. Basically, his daughter is getting married in April, and as a father he wants to walk her down the aisle, so he just has to start walking by then. It's a lifelong dream to have a full-blown wedding for his daughter. Lucas congratulated the patient's daughter on her future wedding and said that her father would definitely be able to walk by then, which even brought tears of joy. The first thing the doctor suggested was to use a quadruped cane, to visually assess what exactly is the problem. So far, the patient is still struggling with it, but he is walking better than before. By applying the magic eye skill, the guy managed to notice that the person tries to lean on the toes instead of the heel. To correct this, the hypotenuse in the posterior muscles of the thigh needs to be extended. You could say Lucas already knows 100% how to treat this patient. Let's fix this hypotenuse. The first step is to stand up and lean forward so that your feet don't reach the floor. Once the patient is in this position, treatment can be performed. With the magic hand skill in place, let's get to work. First, let's start with anti-gravity muscles. This is a whole group of muscles that help actively keep the body upright and help you overcome gravity. They help a person walk upright and are located all over the body from the neck to the feet. They also include the hamstrings, the tendons of the 3 posterior thigh muscles, the semitendinosus, and biceps femoris, and the calf muscle. So the best way to stretch them is to put them under gravity. Right now, the patient's muscles are pathologically shortened. For the next procedure, Lucas asked his patient to lie on his back and lower his left leg. A large number of joints are responsible for the movement of a person. It is necessary to concentrate on the limb as much as possible. At this point, the patient should feel a touch in the area of the heel, and at one moment push the doctor's hand. Since the muscles that have come into action have not been used for a long time, such procedures can be a little painful. The patient's wife began to feel a little worried. But it's actually okay. Puck is now feeling more surprised than more, as the muscles that have not been used for a long time suddenly came into motion. The patient is even doing very well. Now he needs to visualize himself walking and offer even more effort. In the end, the miracle happens, the muscles are fully functional again. Now came the most important moment. Pak had the desire to stand up. At the first steps, Lucas will definitely back him up, so do not worry, and just try to walk. The patient couldn't believe that he was able to do it after only one session. And now it is necessary to smoothly firmly stand on the leg, so that the muscles have already fully started to work as before. Having done this, Pak was able to start walking. The guy held him only by the hand. He really is doing well. Compared to what was it can already be called a victory. In the meantime, the guy had already received a notification in the system that the treatment was complete, and as a reward he received 20 points and his reputation increased by 3 units. After walking around for a while, Lucas asked his patient to sit down and rest. but he also wondered why his reputation had increased. As it turned out, 3 people who were nearby saw that the patient, who had recently been unable to speak, was on his feet and walking. At least 3 people began to respect Lucas for this. Puck said that he was now in a great mood and felt a surge of strength in his left leg. It's very good, but he doesn't really have more strength, it's just that the area of his foot in contact with the floor has increased, so it's starting to feel like he has more strength. If you keep practicing hard, you'll soon be able to walk on your own. Even before your daughter's wedding starts, you can fully participate in the preparation phase. The wife was so grateful for her husband's recovery, she almost cried. It's Lucas' job to get people back to normal. The appointment was over for today, and there will be a follow-up consultation tomorrow. The clients said their goodbyes and walked happily out the door. As soon as they were out the door, the doctor who had taken care of Puck earlier ran to Lucas. He said that at this time of year the patient she was getting better just by looking at him. In other words, he meant that this patient's results were solely due to him. Usually when people feel better just by looking at him, it means they've been to a psychic, not a clinic. Then William got into the conversation and confirmed that Puck was getting better, solely from the treatment, so he shouldn't be a bully, but rather go and deal with the patients who for some reason hadn't yet started walking at the mere sight of him. Of course there were excuses that the other patients were older and needed more time. I wondered why he was so determined to attack me for no particular reason. William laughed and said, "It's because the new doctor is from another hospital. There will always be competition between them. We need to give people some time to get used to it, and then everything will be fine. By the way, this problem will be especially visible at the corporate party. But don't worry, there's a good atmosphere at the team party." Initially, Lucas assumed that it was not a general hospital event, but only a team event, but as it turned out, this is not quite true. There will be present all the employees of the hospital, and it is impossible to refuse to come. So it's gonna be a fun event. Despite the party that was coming up, William suggested to Lucas that in the future the two of them should have a drink of something stronger. At the end of the workday, the guy went to the break room and began to ponder whether it was worth spending the glasses. With the looks we have now, is there any point in investing in a magic face next? This time rationality still took its course. The guy decided to spend 15 points on magic hands, and another 10 on magic eyes. Since then, the vision has improved significantly. Now it will be much easier to identify the patient's disease. Also, thanks to the increase in the skill of magic hands, treatment will become much easier. The most interesting thing is that every time you don't know what to expect from the improvement, but this time it was a bit meager. The only way to test your strength is to do quests without stopping. Since it's 6 p.m., that means the workday is over. We still have a corporate retreat to get ready for. After some time, all the workers were already dressed up and beautifully gathered near the entrance to the hospital. Everyone would be taken to the restaurant by bus. Please take your seats carefully in advance. Lucas was shocked at the organization, to say the least, and had no idea where they were going. During the trip, the guy even managed to fall asleep, not so much as he strongly does not want to go anywhere. So far he is all alone, and he does not even have anyone to talk to at this party. In the end, the travel time was only 15 minutes. The bus stopped outside one of the swankiest restaurants in this town. Hiring a bus for 15 minutes is the #1 hospital in the country. The organizer said that the head of the department would be here very soon, so it was advisable to wait for him and then start the dinner. Everyone kindly agreed. As Lucas looked around, he realized that many people had already made friends for a long time. It's a good thing that a lot of the people who were with him at the interview were able to get jobs after all. As soon as he entered the place, he said that everyone can eat. He is not one of those who focus on it. The party immediately played with other colors. People began to eat, drink, and walk. The first toast was made to the newcomers, because they have the greatest expectations. The party continued, but Lucas was approached by his boss. He was very interested to know if the assistant liked the hospital. The guy got nervous for some reason and turned around with a smile and answered that he liked it here very much, and it seemed that he was slowly getting used to everything. The chief was curious about the assistant head of Ward 3 of the emergency room. But he seemed more than okay. This assistant seems to be adapting as well. But his treatment skills are hard to call normal. Everyone was already having a lot of fun. So the jokes about the patients started. Lucas recalled one patient who, after the assistant started working with him, had an immediate load response phase that had not been observed before. The load response phase is a term referring to the second step in the walking process. Of course, Lucas's joke about the patient was not to everyone's liking. The chief decided to react to the guy's incomprehensible remarks, too. And so if he so received a response to the load, then the assistant Lucas should remember how things are progressing with thematic conferences, scheduled for March. A conference is a large, lengthy meeting on a particular topic. Due to the fact that the event is attended by dignitaries of the hospital, the speaker is under indescribable pressure from the people around him. The March conference was scheduled to be conducted by Assistant Khan. But the boss, he had slightly different plans. And with a smirk, he made it clear that he just wanted to give Lucas a chance. Lucas was not confused. The March conference meant a lot to him, and he promised to give his best. The chief thought the guy was ambitious and called him a real man. It was to him and to this event that the next toast was made. A supervisor approached a girl asking if it was true that she had broken up with her boyfriend. It was his sister. And he was quite worried that the girl didn't think about her personal life at all. And he also emphasized her age and that she should get married sooner rather than later. Someone came up to Lucas and took him by the shoulder. But all the boy's thoughts were about the March conference. It was written all over his face. He pretended not to understand anything, but his colleagues guessed that Lucas was thinking about the conference transfer. Lucas saw Sophia being yelled at for missing 3 ice creams. The girl ran off to fetch them. Lucas immediately went after her. Sophia was happy to see him. She was mad pleased that the guy wanted to help her. Colleagues saw the assistant with ice cream and were shocked. He could have just asked the interns to bring it, but he ended up bringing it all by himself. Lucas got out of it and explained that Sophia just didn't have enough hands, so he decided to help her. The head of the ward complex turned to the therapist. The head was quite angry, because he had already explained many times that it was not necessary to give personal orders to interns. The therapist immediately started to justify and apologize for the act. At the end, Lucas said goodbye to Sophia and advised her to go and rest, because the poor had to work here. The party came to an end. And as at any such event, some people had to be carried out of the place. The guy was watching the night city and suddenly heard a voice that sounded painfully familiar to him. It was Sophia again, who couldn't stop thanking him for helping her with the ice cream. Luck laughed. Sophia immediately realized it was her nose. Sophia had one cute thing going on. As soon as it got just a little colder outside, the tip of her nose would turn red. She even had a nickname for it. They had a nice conversation, and Lucas suggested that they take a ride to Seoul National University. While on the transport, Lucas noticed that the girl's nose was still red. Suddenly they reached the university. The guy wished them a good trip home. Almost getting out of the transportation, he heard the girl shout again, thanking him for his help. The smile couldn't get off his face. The workday came. Lucas was already working with a patient. He was curious about the man's well-being after he had intuitively started walking. The patient had previously felt clumsy when walking, but now he felt much better. Lucas would have been very pleased that after 4 days the patient's condition had indeed improved, but he was concerned that he couldn't see the man's wife. As he wheeled the wheelchair in, he overheard an interesting conversation between the woman. She was talking to her daughter, who did not speak well of her father, even though he had worked hard to get to her wedding. This poor woman's daughter was only worried about her reputation. She couldn't take it anymore and just hung up the phone. When the woman turned around, she saw the doctor and begged him not to tell anyone about the conversation. The woman was the spouse of Lucas' patient. A few more days passed and it was Saturday, March 6th. The conference was 2 weeks away and Lucas was preparing hard. It was very difficult for him to work on the weekend. The guy immediately ran to the patient's room, but saw his worried and upset face. The man was already well aware of the whole situation with his daughter. He was incredibly hurt that she didn't want him at the ceremony. He realized that she was ashamed of him because of his illness. The patient had only thought about fixing her back, but he would not be welcome at the wedding. Lucas realized that this was really hard for a man to accept, and he tried to support his patient in every possible way. In his mind, he was thinking that everything would work out for the man, he just needed to believe in himself. The assistant promised that the daughter would still change her mind about her decision. Everything will be just fine, because miracles are actually closer than they seem. That's how it happens. A man in his old age can get more support from a doctor he doesn't know than from his own daughter, who thought of such a statement. In this situation, Lucas was also a great psychologist. When the guy came to the restroom, he realized such a horror now this man is experiencing. His own daughter is ashamed of her father, although she is already practically walking. To cheer him up somehow, the guy decided to dedicate the upcoming conference to him. It is March 19th, the day of the announcement of the conference. This event will be held in one of the auditoriums of the hospital. Lucas has started to worry, but he needs to pull himself together and present his work in a dignified way. Lucas even changed the title, writing that it is a conference on the case of patient Puck. They are the first guests to arrive. What a harmonious couple. Lucas asked them to imagine today as if they were having a very ordinary day. The guys agreed and said they were counting on the guy. About a week ago, a meeting was held between Lucas and Pac's spouse. The topic that was raised that evening was very important to the whole family. The doctor suggested inviting his daughter to the conference. His wife didn't immediately support the idea, because they didn't have the best relationship with her. Lucas knew that, but he asked it for a reason. Despite the bad relationship, it's what Puck needs right now, for his daughter to attend as well. The woman said she would try to communicate with her, but no result is guaranteed. If the stars align, the patient will be motivated to continue treatment, and the daughter may have a change of attitude towards her father. It would be great if she did come in. After the main guests, all the senior doctors and directors of this hospital entered the hall. It was time to start this March conference. While waiting for all the guests to take their seats, the guy was thinking only one phrase in his head: miracles are closer than they seem. Before beginning, Lucas introduced himself to all the guests and suggested that we start right away. To begin, he decided to introduce the audience to his patient. The job he has spent most of his life at is an excavator driver. At the introduction stage, Lucas thought that this man was trying to recover in order to get back behind the wheel, but it turned out not to be the case. His goal was not only to drive, but also to walk again. In order not to make the introduction too long today, the guy decided to go straight to the hypotheses and possible treatment options. But suddenly the head raised his hand and questioned why Lucas hadn't told him the purpose of the patient wanting to learn to walk instead of drive. Just this question, the guy was going to reveal a little later. Since there were no more questions, the host proceeded to demonstrate a way to test his hypothesis. Distinctive signs of patients in the acute stage of the disease are ankylosis and cramping. That Pac also complains of these pains. The presenter usually asks the patient to come in 20 minutes before the start of the procedures to apply a cold compress. This allows treatment to be carried out without fear of consequences. The effectiveness of cold and warm compresses on ankylosis has been proven by Dominic Becker. Since the compress has been previously placed today, treatment can be started immediately. First, Lucas asked his patient to stand up. As you can see, his heel is off the ground. This is due to a shortened calf muscle. When the facilitator asked his patient to take a step, he started to walk differently than usual, most likely because he is a little nervous. In the standing position, the calf muscles are under the influence of gravity. Now you can see how the distance between the heel and the floor is significantly reduced when walking. But this is not enough for now, so it is necessary to shift the weight forward. With the help of the handhold, the patient was able to straighten his leg further. Then the magic eye skill was activated, which told him how to hold the patient perfectly. Just a few more steps and everything would work out. The guy definitely did not pump his magic hands to the 3rd level for nothing. When suddenly a miracle happens, the heel finally touches the floor. The audience was shocked by what they had just seen. The senior doctors were equally surprised. They could not believe that such a result could be achieved in such a short period of time. And after a few minutes, the patient starts to walk around the stage without any problems. How could it be possible? His gait had changed in just one touch, and no one in this hospital had ever done that before. Then, during his performance, Lucas saw Puck's wife and daughter-in-law at the back of the auditorium. And 2 hours before the show, Lucas asked for the daughter's phone number from the patient's spouse, called her, introduced himself as her father's doctor, and said he'd like to talk to her, so he took a chance and called her directly. Then he asked her to meet her father just once and see what he'd accomplished for the family. And then, miraculously, she showed up. As the patient is a former excavator driver, every day for 30 years he climbed into the cab and passed the wheel. No matter how hard it was for him, he knew he was doing it for his family. And now his precious daughter has decided to get married, a very solemn event that every father wants to attend. The patient wanted to walk again, just so he could take his daughter by the hand and walk her down the aisle. Now this aisle is the way to the altar, and the guests gathered here are honorable people. Family, please take care of your father, because he is trying so hard for you. You are the only thing he lives for. In an instant, the audience noticed how a business meeting turned into something more different, more tender, but no one minded. The daughter immediately approached her father, took his hand, and in an instant the memories came flooding back. How much fun they had together. The father was insanely happy, and thanked his daughter for taking his hand again. He missed it so much. After these words, the girl cried, and began to apologize for the way she behaved towards him. Not every father deserves to go through this. All the spectators who were in the audience started clapping. Today was a family reunion in front of the whole hospital. Even the directors gave a standing ovation. They had never seen such a level of presentation before. By the way, Lucas, for successfully completing the treatment of his patient, received plus 30 units as a reward, and raised his reputation by 20 units.